Well, welcome to the Cut for Time podcast here at the Canton United Methodist Church. My name is Pastor Clay. I'm joined by Eric Stearns, and we are back from our 1 week hiatus. My wife, Lindsay, had a baby last Sunday on the 7th of November. We have a little girl named Emmeline. I took the week last week to be a dad, and so we took a week off for recording, but we're back now to have a conversation about my sermon from Sunday, bringing to an end the Treasure series that we've been preaching through for the past couple of weeks. So let's get into it.
That's one thing I've been thinking about a lot is where my treasure lies. You know, not just as myself, but even as our family, like our family time, like where we're spending that time, like how we're spending that time, because it's so finite the amount of time you get to spend with your family.
Absolutely.
You know, and so what things do we want to do? Jen and I were honestly just talking about this tonight. Like what activities, extracurricular type stuff, sports, that kind of thing. You know, what are we going to want our kids to be doing?
Yeah, definitely.
And how much time do we want to devote to just, you know, the five of us at home? Or that's a struggle for me.
If you don't have that type of a conversation, those decisions are going to get made for you. You know, and like you can spend your entire life chasing kids around extracurricular activities. Kids see the immediate and, you know, my friends are doing this, so I have to do this. But if you as a family don't have that conversation about what do you treasure, I mean, those decisions can get made for you before you even think twice about it.
Right. And then all of a sudden you're, like you said, you're chasing kids, you're chasing the next thing, and then you don't develop, and you don't develop yourself as a family unit.
Right.
You develop yourself as a bunch of people riding a car together. Yeah. You know?
And like there are ways to redeem that if you, I mean, once you find yourself in that situation, like it's not hopeless from that point. You know, there are ways that you can find. I mean, that's why, you know, that's why I'm so insistent on Faith 5 home huddles. Is because it is the perfect opportunity. Oh, we're in the car for the next 25 minutes driving to a thing. We can take the next 10 minutes as a family and talk. You know, oh, we didn't bring a Bible. Guess what? It's on all of our phones. The YouVersion app is completely free.
Right.
You know, it's right there. You know, and it's one way among many that you can redeem that time if you do find yourself in a busier season of life.
I struggle with, I'm sure you do too, the things that society says are treasures or that we should treasure.
Yes.
Such as success in sports. Or being, you know, how do we say no to those things? You know, and how do you say no to the immediate, like you just pointed out?
We're sitting here as two dads, like when we have those conversations with our kids as they get older, they're not going to get it.
No.
I mean, automatically. They're going to see an opportunity that they didn't get to be a part of because my dad's you know, fill in whatever blank the teenagers want to fill in there, you know.
And we will wear that as a badge of honor.
Preach. Preach. It is hard. I mean, I can't imagine how hard it would be to have to say no to a certain thing or to a certain, you know, opportunity or whatever. You know, like when I was in middle school, I was on the verge of breaking our middle school shot put record. And there happened to be this a track meet coming up. I felt like I should be able to throw a shot put in that because I was gonna break the school record that day. And my mom and dad were very just kind of honest with me and say, "You're close, yes, but you're not there, and it's not going to happen at this meet. You're not going to miss another day of school for this." But like even when I was in high school, like I did track my freshman year of high school, and my parents looked at how much school I was missing and said, "You are done.
Yeah,
you are out. You throw shot put you throw shot put okay, and that was true even in high school. I can't throw a discus to save my soul." So like I would go, I'd throw my shot put, I'd play somewhere in the middle of the pack. I would throw the discus. I would scratch every throw, and I would sit there the whole rest of the day playing poker or joking around or whatever, or taking a nap and not being in school. You know, and so my parents just looked at me and said, "This is not an okay choice for you, and you're done." I understood, but I didn't want to understand. I was, you know, it was the right choice. I could not see that then, but basically is just taking the hit and being, you know, saying that trying to help your child understand that this is the right choice in the long run even if you don't get the immediacy of it, and then just being the bad guy.
Yeah. And disappointing your kids is so hard,
It is.
you know,
Absolutely it is. Yep.
whether it's now or 10 years from now.
Yep.
It's never going to get easy.
Nope. Not at all.
But I think also just self-evaluation of what your values are
Yeah.
can be so hard.
Yes.
Because you don't want to give up an hour and a half or 2 hours of Netflix at the end of the day. You don't want to give up, I don't know, X, Y, and Z.
Yeah.
But are those time wasters? You know?
Yeah. It's a hard conversation to have, but it's such a necessary conversation to have. I mean, which is why, by the way, in the midst of preaching the sermon series, why I did a pledge card is because I hope that becomes a tool that households can use to have that hard conversation.
Right.
You know, the first question on the on the pledge card, after you do your name and your number and your email address, is are you going to support the church financially in the upcoming year? And like that in itself is a conversation worth having. You check the box yes or no. If you check no, you're done with the rest of the thing. But then okay, what does that actually look like for us to support the church financially in the given year? Those are good conversations that a household should have together to ensure that you're making faithful choices for your family. And I think that idea of that giving tools to make that an easier conversation to have will hopefully mean that more people will have the conversation.
No one likes to budget.
No. No.
Everyone avoids it. I avoid it.
Yep.
I have a budget in my head, and I think we're close to it, but I haven't done a formal one in so long. And so when you get this pledge card,
Right.
and you don't really have a good handle of where your finances are over here with what you're already spending your money on,
Right.
and then you don't understand what things you can get rid of. You may have an idea of what in your head you can get rid of.
Yep.
But it makes it even more stressful to fill out that number on the pledge card.
I am hoping that what we're doing on Sunday will lead over into a conversation on Sunday night with your family. I'm not just talking crazy up here to talk crazy. I'm talking crazy up here because, Jesus wants to change our lives. Jesus wants us to reevaluate our priorities, and Jesus wants to reset things so that our life looks more like him than it does what we think our life should look like.
So this week you talked about worrying
Yes.
in your sermon. How do we tie that into giving of our time and talents and treasure and gifts?
Definitely.
That kind of thing?
I think that there is, it was kind of what we talked about a couple weeks ago where you were talking about how freeing it was. And I said, hey, man, hold on. We're going to get there in 2 weeks. This is where we can pick that back up.
Sure.
Like our giving, our worry. Jesus tells us not to worry about things that are temporal. Things like clothing and things like what we're going to eat and things like where we're going to sleep. Those types of things, God's going to figure those out for us. We do not have to worry about them. God will supply for our basic needs. And when that feels hard to see, I get that. Like there have been seasons where I haven't been able to see that provision. God's going to take care of those basic needs. We don't have to worry about them. What Jesus challenges us to then is to strive first, to seek first, to worry first about the eternal things of the kingdom of God. And that is where we talk about how we spend our time and our talent and our treasure. Because we don't have to worry about these basic things. We can look at how we can then look to others. Because I'm squared away. I can say, Eric, what can we do to help? Because I'm squared away, because I'm not worrying about my basic necessities, because I believe that God's going to take care of it. I can look to the concerns of the world and say, I have this much resource. Time, talent, treasure, energy, attention span. I have this much resource. How can I spend this much resource doing good in the world around me? Doing good for something else, doing good to improve someone else's situation. How can I be what God is up to in taking care of those basic needs for someone else? That's where our worry subsides and then starts to get bigger. We don't have to worry about this so that we can worry about that. It's not that Jesus doesn't want us to worry about anything and that everything that happens is just fine with our lives. We're being called and we're being challenged by Jesus every single day to look around and see where we can be of service.
Right.
And how and how our giving is a part of that.
The thought I had, as you were saying, not to be indifferent, not to be aloof, whatever, and just not care. Like, God tells us not to worry,
Right.
but God also gives us tools
Yes.
to help us not worry.
Correct. Yes.
And so we shouldn't just sit around and do nothing. God calls us to do, and God, whatever that might be, gives us, allows us to work so we can have money to,
Right.
Pay for things or
Yep.
whatever else.
Yes, absolutely.
So yeah, I agree with you. I think some people take it the wrong way that we shouldn't, that the Christians are just lazy and
Right.
we just plan that God's going to take care of everything.
Right. Yeah.
No,
Exactly.
God's going to make sure we have to do something for it.
Yep. Or worse, the opposite can be true too, where we worry about something and then beat ourselves up for worrying
Bingo.
because Jesus said not to worry. I just think that can be such a dangerous line of thought and lead us to such a place of self-defeat that we just don't need to go into.
Right.
Like I had a friend, this is previous appointment, but like I had a friend of mine say to me that I think the fact that I worry about this is sinful. And it was just like, it was about her grandkids or something like that. And it's just like, no, you're supposed to care about your grandkids. Supposed to just worry about it and then just, stew on it and get,
Right.
get yourself tied up into a knot. But like, you're not supposed to not notice. There is no sin in saying this concerns me or I am worried about XYZ unless you say something and then just start to get into that cycle and then you get stuck.
Yeah.
Like,
Worrying yourself into inaction.
right. Yes.
That's more of a sin than just being concerned about
Yes.
something.
Absolutely.
One thing I've been thinking about recently with people get so stressed about politics.
Yes.
A year ago, everyone was stressed about the current presidential situation. 1 year later, we're still stressed about the president. Nothing's changed except it's a different person. We're
Yes.
stressed about different things that this person's doing.
Uh-huh.
So when are people going to realize that that's not our solution?
Right.
And as Christians, don't worry about that.
Uh-huh.
That was through that whole sermon. I just kept thinking about that. I'm like,
Uh-huh.
why do we even? I mean, we should care,
Yes.
but we should just not get so bent out of shape about
Correct.
what's going on there because that's not where our salvation lies.
No, not at all. Not at all. Whew, you might be teeing me up for next week pretty well, Eric, because next week is a day in the life of the church called Christ the King Sunday,
Okay.
where our focus is going to be on the fact that it's good to be aware of where we are in the world. It's good to be aware of our political situation. It's even okay to have political leanings and feelings as long as we realize that they are always subservient to the gospel of Jesus Christ. That is our ultimate identity. That is our ultimate, we don't have to worry about how we make decisions because we look to Jesus first and foremost. Right. We should, at least. And that's me talking as much as anybody else. But I wish it were just solved by one Sunday. But it's not, because it is just a constant stream around us.
Right. That's awesome. One thing along those lines that I've been thinking about, like, I love what you're saying there is our decision making should stream from the gospel. And I think where we get so angry with each other is on both sides, we're no longer making decisions based on the moral, off the gospel.
Right.
We're just, whatever I feel is right and whatever you feel is wrong.
Yes.
And if we could all just come to it with, this is what Jesus wants us to do. You and I can disagree with how that should be interpreted.
Right. Yeah.
But at least we're at that point. We're all
Yes.
coming from the same point.
Yep.
And now we discuss and figure it out from there because
Right.
we're not there anymore.
No, not at all.
We're just not.
Well, it has nothing to do with politics. It has everything to do with the fact that I think that I am the highest authority. And you have no right to tell me how I should act. And that's where we are,
Right.
for so many things. But, and how we combat that is by the gospel. How we combat that is by looking, what we talked about a couple weeks ago. No one can serve two masters.
Mm-hmm.
You'll either hate one and love the other. You'll be obedient to one and disregard the other. It will not work. Mm-hmm. It's the same idea. Who is the master of our lives? What ultimately do we pledge our ultimate allegiance and devotion to? And if it's anything other than Jesus, we have to have a conversation about it.
Right.
Because that's not how it's supposed to be. If we really lived in the light of what the Word of God told us to do, so much of this would just be a non-issue.
Life would be so much easier.
Man, right? So with this being the last week of this message series, we're going to be pivoting away from treasure on Sunday, moving to one Sunday called Christ the King and then the season of Advent. Eric, I would just love to hear if you have any final thoughts, key takeaways from the sermon series, or things that you're going to hold on to, or maybe even want to keep chewing on as a result of the sermon series that we just went through together.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so other than what I'd mentioned earlier about what I was struggling with, I keep thinking about, like, who is it that I serve? And that you can't serve two masters. And that has stuck with me, since that was, 3 weeks ago? That has stuck with me. And I think if I just go into my decision-making with that thought, as a part of my decision-making.
Yeah, definitely.
That'll be helpful, because if we have the right person on who I serve, it makes the decision easier.
Yeah.
And you can say, well, is this how God would want me to handle this? Is this how Jesus would want me to handle this? Mm-hmm. If that's a yes, then yep, that's the decision I should make.
Yep. Yeah. Yep.
So that stuck out to me a lot.
Nice. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's that difference between thy will be done and my will be done. And, in the Lord's Prayer, it's pretty clear what we are to be praying for, what we're to be looking for is ways that we can fulfill the will of God, even if that is up and against the will of Clay and Eric.
So I think that wraps up the stewardship series. Mm-hmm. So what are we going to start on next week?
I'm self-proclaimed church nerd. We all know this to be true. Mm-hmm. And Sunday is Christ the King Sunday. And the church has set aside this week to remind us that Christ is King. Mm-hmm. It's also the church year New Year's Eve, because the church year starts in Advent.
Oh, sure.
So with this being the last Sunday before Advent, this is our New Year's Eve. This is our our moment to wrap up the year that was and say, how did my life look more like Jesus this year than it did last year, and how will my life look more like Jesus as I go forward into this new year?
Thanks for joining us on this week's Cut for Time podcast. Join us again next week on Sunday in person or online, or again for the podcast next week.
Thanks for listening to our Cut for Time conversation. Join us for worship in person or on Facebook Live Sundays at 10 o'clock Central Time. And now go in peace and serve the Lord.